This is your urgent call to action. We are all called to lead in a world in chaos, crisis, and turmoil. Join a pivotal global movement for change to transform the leadership crisis worldwide. Will you play it safe, or will you wake up, step up, and speak out? Like Nelson Mandela did for South Africa and the world, we need a radical new way to think, act, and lead, leading boldly into the future. Join host Ann Pratt, a Harvard Fellow and multi-awarded businesswoman, and unlock the best version of yourself to revolutionize leadership with what the world needs now.
Greetings to all you future bold leaders. Thank you for joining us from around the world. My name is Ann Pratt. I'm formerly from South Africa and relocated abroad to attend a Harvard Leadership Fellowship in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States of America. Our bold leader today joins us from the beautiful mountainous state of Colorado in the United States. He is the former chief executive and chairman of Medtronic, a global healthcare technology leader, and also served on the boards of corporate giants like Goldman Sachs, ExxonMobil, Novartis, Target, and the Mayo Clinic. He is a Harvard Business School professor who has successfully blended his academic and business life and has touched and impacted the lives of possibly 10,000 students who have come through the Harvard Business School and the Harvard Kennedy School, myself included. He's a best-selling author of leadership classics, including Authentic Leadership and True North. And hot off the press, he has recently co-authored and just launched what is possibly and probably his most important book to date, the Emerging Leaders edition of True North. We warmly welcome Professor Bill George and welcome to Leading Boldly into the Future. So Bill, thank you so much for coming on and congratulations on your new book, True North and Emerging Leaders edition. It's just wonderful to have you come and share more of the work you're doing in the world.
Thank you, Ann. It's so great to be back with you.
I had the great privilege of being in your exec ed program at Harvard Business School on authentic leadership and finding your true north. I was curious to know this new edition, True North Emerging Leaders Edition, why this book and why now?
Well, Ann, this is really a clarion call to the new generations of leaders to step up. I think the baby boomers have had their day, if you will, and we can become the wisdom leaders that provide guidance to people, although I do feature a number of great baby boomer leaders like Ken Frazier of Merck and Indra Nooyi from PepsiCo and Satya Nadella from Microsoft, so many of them in there. But I think the important thing now is that the world has changed so much and we're going from one crisis to the next. And we need a new generation of leaders who have lived through these crises the last 20 years, starting with 9/11, 2001, and seen the financial meltdown, seen COVID, and know how to lead people through these. It's no longer a time of stability where leaders grow their business in stable times, but where we have emerging leaders who have the understanding of how to unite and inspire people. And it is a very different world today of the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the Gen Zs that I include as emerging leaders. So my hope is to inspire them to step up and take the lead in all organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, medical, military, healthcare, you name it, academia. I hope that this will happen. And I want to inspire them to do and to lead with their hearts and to lead authentically.
Yeah, and, in that process, Bill, how would you define authentic leadership?
Being an authentic leader is being who you are and being genuinely concerned with the people you're leading. To be a servant leader of people. They're not there to serve you. You're serving them. And I think as an authentic leader, your first job is to align people around the mission and values of your organization. It's not to get the numbers right. You have to inspire people to a higher calling. What is that higher calling you're working for? At Medtronic, that higher calling was restoring people to full life and health. And we were able to greatly expand the number of people we help tremendously from, 300,000 a year to today. Now, 20 years later, it's like, a couple million a year, several million a year. So it's a big change in how we look at leadership. And I hope the leaders today will see themselves not as directing people, but more as their coach who empowers them to reach their full potential. That's been my goal for a long time, to help leaders reach their full potential as leaders, because they can help so many people.
Yeah. And, you alluded to the fact that, the Jack Welch kind of baby boom, era is over. What do you think is radically new, and what do you think are the big strategic challenges that these emerging leaders will face in the world?
Well, what's new is that today leadership is not about meeting the needs of the shareholder like it was for Jack Welch. It's really meeting the needs of the customers, clients, the people you serve, and understanding the needs of all your employees. We're in the midst of employee revolution, where employees have agency today they never had before. But I think if you do those two things well, you inspire your employees to meet the needs of your customers, and build highly successful communities, something business lost sight of, then we will meet the needs of our shareholders, who are indeed a stakeholder. And that's how you create great shareholder value. But it's got to be sustainable. It doesn't do any good to do it for a year or two, or see a great company like General Electric, you mentioned, go through a demise under Jeff Immelt that it has the last 20 years, where there's just the businesses left. But GE, as we knew it, is gone. So I want to see sustainable organizations that are there to help people and to create great jobs and careers for leaders who want to make a difference in the world. That's been my goal long before I left Medtronic, but it's been particularly my goal for the last 20 years. I've tried to coach and educate and help and mentor a lot of leaders that came through Harvard Business School and executive education programs like you did. And also, people throughout the world.
Yeah. Bill, something that struck me, not only having done your program, but also, in your books, is that you talk about a crucible, a life-defining moment. Can you share with us how you would define a crucible, but also share with us an example of a crucible in your young life? What was that difficult moment for you that really helped shape who you are and the work you do today?
I define a crucible as the most challenging time in your life, when you come face to face with yourself, when all the pretense is stripped away and all the things external, if you will, validation you get, and really look in the mirror and say, who am I? And that happens often because things don't go your way. And I'll give you an example of my own life. My father, I'm an only child of older parents. And my father wanted me to become the leader he never became. So when I was 9, 10 years old, he's telling me, son, you could become the leader I never became, and you could be head of a major corporation. He named the companies. Well, I didn't know exactly what he was talking about, but I did join a lot of organizations in high school, junior high. I was never selected to lead anything, and I never elected the student council. A good enough tennis player to play college tennis, but not even co-captain my high school tennis team. But my senior year, I decided to run for president senior class. And when the votes came in, I lost by a margin of 2-1. So it's pretty clear I wasn't a leader. So I went off to Georgia Tech, 800 miles away. And like a glutton for punishment, I did it all over again. I lost 6 more times. So now I'm 0 for 7, feeling like a real loser. And then the best thing that ever happened to me, some seniors pulled me aside and said, Bill, we got to give you a message. No one's ever going to want to work with you, much less be led by you, because you're moving so fast to get ahead. You don't take time for other people. And that was like a blow to all my leadership hopes, because they were right. They understood. And I, trying to put together my own self-help development program, was able to lead many organizations. But that was a crucible for me then. And I had more crucibles later, but that one really struck me then, because I had to really face who I was for about a year and do a lot of reflection and introspection and a lot of reading.
And in those steps, Bill, I mean, that really is a moment of reckoning. In those steps, when you said you put together a kind of self-help development program, Can you take us through what were the steps and how did you kind of navigate your way out of that feeling of, well, let me not put words into your mouth. I mean, you said you felt like a loser. I'm not, how did you feel and what were the steps you took to navigate?
Oh, I read some books that really helped me tremendously. And I remember I'm a person of faith, and rereading Corinthians 1:13 about what it means to love. I realized how much I had to go, and I went back and got feedback from a number of people on where I was missing the mark and where I'd offended them, and learned how to be vulnerable. And really, frankly, leadership came down to relationships and really spending a lot more time. And then I started mentoring and coaching a lot of people. So it was getting the feedback, it was being introspective, and then seeing my role as trying to help other people. At the time when they confronted me, it was like I was building a resume. Here are all the organizations I'm in. Here's what I'm doing. It's like I'm running for office because I want that title. And it really is not about that.
Yeah, yeah. You alluded earlier to the fact that we're past the model of shareholder capitalism, and you talk about stakeholder capitalism. You've alluded to some of those stakeholders. In this stakeholder capitalism model, how would you advise emerging leaders today in terms of competing interests between different stakeholders? Where is the balance, and what priority do you still give to shareholders for putting up the capital, running the financial risks?
Well, I believe the way lasting shareholder value is created is because you serve your customers. And that's what inspires your employees. That's what creates innovation. You can spend billions on R&D and nothing will come out, like Pfizer a few decades ago, unless you have inspired employees. And they've got to be inspired by a higher purpose and of meeting customer needs. Now, it could be something simple as creating an airline where the flight attendants and everyone on board, the captain, the pilots, really are there to serve the passengers. Could be happening at a restaurant. It could be at Medtronic, where everyone works on a production line and realizes there's a human life at the end of that heart valve. And if it doesn't work, someone could die. And so it's that sense of higher calling. That's the leader's job, to get them to understand there is a higher calling there. And I think when you do that, then your revenues are naturally going to increase. You're going to get more share of market. You're going to have a lot of new markets you can enter with innovative products. That's what we did at Medtronic. And that's going to generate a lot of profitability. But the key to that is, yes, you increase your shareholder value with that, but also you have to continue to reinvest in the model. And the problem we had in the shareholder primacy model is people were focusing on maximizing shareholder value. Well, that'll work for 2 or 3 years, and then your enterprise will be gone. That's what happened to GE. GE is gone today because they didn't reinvest in things that really mattered, especially their people. And that's so critical that you invest in creating leaders. Today, it's not about just having one great leader. A truly great leader like Satya Nadella at Microsoft will realize his job is to run a global organization, inspire everyone. But it's having leaders at all levels in every country and every business and every function. And so that's what leaders today need to do, is to be a leader of leaders, not to be a dominant force over the enterprise.
Yeah, yeah. In your wonderful new book, True North for Emerging Leaders, you also reference a new breed of an older generation. People like Ken Frazier, Indra Nooyi, and Ursula Burns. What do you think the new generation can learn from this new breed of an older generation?
Well, let's take Ken Frazier. Here is a man who's grandson of a slave. And his grandfather got his father out of South Carolina, where he'd been an indentured servant, to go to Philadelphia, live in the poorest area of Philadelphia, where the most violence occurred, the gangs dominated. And Ken learned from his father, who never went beyond a janitor. He said, the most valuable lesson in my life is you need to do what you know is right. You don't need to follow and please other people. And Ken carried that throughout his life. So there was a time in 2017 when there was if you will, called a riot, problems in Charlottesville. And Ken Ken was deeply offended by the president who said there was equal responsibility on both sides. And Ken decided to resign very publicly from President Trump's council. But he didn't have to do so publicly. He put everything at risk for Merck, because the government controls their pricing, their new product approvals. They can recall any product. But Ken put that all at risk with moral courage to say, America stands for all people are created equal. And they have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he went on to say, we must give people opportunities regardless of their race, their gender, their religion, sexual preference, sexual identity, or any of these national origin. We need to give everyone that opportunity to live a fulfilled life. And so he really restated what American democracy is all about. By the way, he's still doing that. Oh, by the way, and at Merck, he found a drug that was buried in the labs called Keytruda that's now just treated as 1 millionth patient. It's keeping former President Jimmy Carter alive, who had cancer all over his body, and it's taking it away. So Ken was so dedicated to help other people. And now he's doing that, helping more blacks get hired by companies. He's done amazing work right now in terms of democracy and capitalism. So here is a role model that I look up to. He's a good friend of mine, younger than I am, but is a real leader. He has the moral courage to stand out there and say, this is the right thing to do. And that's what great leaders do.
Yeah. And just out of interest, Bill, do you think there is something that this new generation can learn from the previous era, the Jack Welches of this world? Is there something that they should still learn and take away from that generation?
Jack was a great man for his time. He was a great leader of the 80s and 90s. The times have changed. We're leading through crises, and COVID has changed everyone's attitudes. It's been, I didn't live through World War II, but it's been the most significant event of all of our lifetimes. There's no one who wasn't affected by COVID in some way or another, whether you got it at a relative or you had to stay at home and not go to school or stay at home and not work, or everyone's been affected. And so I think young leaders have led through these times. And so it's not like Jack Welch's era. You can't dominate people. And so I think there are some things you can learn not to do as well. And that's to try to be a command and control leader, to create a big, to dominate other people. It's not about that. Your job as a leader today is to empower other people to reach their full potential. If you can do that, then you can take great satisfaction and you'll have a great organization. An organization of empowered leaders, I'll guarantee you, will outperform over the long term the tops-down organization where all the decisions are made in the CEO and the C-suite and are all based on financial rather than humanity. And ours is an era of humanity, and that's been brought home by COVID. It's been brought home, frankly, by this terrible war that Russia has embarked on in Ukraine. It's been brought on by, frankly, the inflation that people can't afford, or the supply shortages, not getting wheat and bread. What's going to happen in many countries in Africa and other poorer countries of the world that can't get food because there are supply shortages?
You raised some interesting points, Bill. It also strikes me that, for a lot of people, taking a stand, speaking up and taking a stand is often a very difficult and risky decision. What advice would you give to young leaders in terms of when do they take a stand, knowing that very often there's a lot of risk, there are losses, and some very practical risks around, do I keep my job? I have a family to feed. What advice would you give to people in terms of making that decision about when to take a stand?
When you know your true north, you know what is really important to you. You can't take a stand on everything. You can only take a stand on things that are really important to you. And then you don't do it in an aggressive manner. You just are clear about what you believe. And that may mean that you may have to change jobs. I remember I was working for Litton Industries. I had a great job, but I remember the CEO was talking to one of my colleagues who didn't work for me in a different business and talked to him about paying bribes. And he said, I know you have to do what you have to do. Well, I don't believe in that. And so I had to work for a company with great integrity. And Honeywell had that integrity, but when I found Medtronic, I really found my sweet spot. So I think you speak out on things that are really important. I remember at Medtronic, I got a lot of pushback by speaking out on behalf of LGBTQ plus employees and feeling like they had a right and speaking on behalf of marriage equality. And this offended some people in the company. But I said, this is what this company stands for, and it's consistent with Medtronic's values and our beliefs, that everyone is equal and they're treated equally in the company. And I feel that strongly. And that it's not about what you are, it's about who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, talking about Ukraine, what do you think? A lot of people ask the question, what can I do? What would you say to them?
We're dealing with a lot of the fallout right now. I have an enormous admiration for President Zelensky and his courage to stay there. You probably saw the president of Sri Lanka just abandon the country to save his neck. Well, Zelensky, I didn't think would make it, and they may not. And that's courage. That's the courage. And he is such an inspiring person for his people. Here they're fighting against overwhelming odds with Russia, which is so much larger and has so much bigger military. But they have the courage to defend their country. And doesn't everyone want to do that? That's what happened in my parents' generation in World War II, is people had to defend their country and get their countries back. And defend principles. But I think a lot of companies now are really responding. I remember the CEO of AB InBev told the story about how he lives in New York. He went to Belgium to get an update on the situation. And then he flew to the Polish-Ukrainian border. And they had to close the factory with 300 people. And of course, the men were not allowed to leave the country. But he greeted all the family members and many female employees as they crossed the border. And they provided housing for them. They provided meals. He talked about going to a community center and parks where all these Ukrainian employees of his company could go. And he was playing ping pong with them and with the kids and all. But the point was, he was present. And I think today's leaders are people that need to be present for their people. And that's what I think we can take away from this horrible war. I don't know how the war will come out. I hate war. There's no excuse for it. But I think in terms of the humanity, it's been brought up. The Polish people have entertained so many immigrants from Ukraine, so many refugees, I should say, from Ukraine in their homes. It's stunning, like 1.2 million. We in America, immigrants made our country what it is today. So we need to open up the doors and allow more people to come in legally. I'm not talking about illegally, but give out a lot more visas. You're in the United States right now, and I believe you're a citizen of South Africa. So we just need to open it up, because that's where the energy comes from. That's where and people that have seen lived these experiences, they can share and inspire all the rest of us.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And turning to another courageous leader that we both admire and respect, Nelson Mandela. I know you've had a couple of connections with South Africa, Bill. I'd love to hear just your first visit to South Africa, what that meant to you. And then, of course, I know you went back with your family. But what was your first experience of South Africa?
Well, I was then president of Honeywell Europe and Middle East and Africa. And I went to South Africa, and I remember we had a chance to spend 3 days extra up in Kruger National Park. And just going to Cape Town, going to Stellenbosch and saying, this amazing. I remember standing up on Table Mountain and looking, and here's the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean coming together. It was a beautiful sight. And I remember leaving the country, I felt a deep sense of sadness that here it's all going to come apart and it's going to end in civil war. Now, you should know that I am very opposed to anything that separates people, certainly apartheid. And I think every person deserves equal opportunities. They have to fulfill it for themselves, so it's not equal outcomes. But they deserve that, and that clearly was being denied people. And we visited a school of all Black children. It was very inspired. But why don't they have the opportunities? So, I then became, if you will, a devotee of Nelson Mandela. And I would have to say that what he did, and when he came out of prison in 1989, I show this in the classroom all the time, his speech on the steps of Cape Town that night. Here's a man that had been in prison for 27 years, that inspiring speech. He said, I am not here just to serve Black South Africans or white South Africans. I'm here to serve all South Africans, and I'm prepared to give my life to that end. Very courageous man. He could have just retired off into the hinterland. And so I would say that Nelson Mandela, of all the leaders I've known and studied, is the greatest leader in my lifetime. And I did have the privilege of spending 15 minutes alone with him when he came to Minneapolis. My wife and I had a chance to talk to him, and he was so inspiring about this sense of... What year was that,
Bill? I'm sorry. Was that... How long ago was that?
Oh, I would say he was still alive then. So I would say it was about 15 years. It was in Minneapolis. And I just found him very, very inspirational, because here's a man with a sense of calling. And I took, when Penny and I had our 50th wedding anniversary in 2019, and I wanted to take, we went up to Tanzania and slept on the ground in tents. But then we wanted to go to Cape Town and go to Robben Island. And we took our whole family there to see where Nelson Mandela spent 27 years. I remember standing with my grandson next to me, who was 11 at the time. His name is Freeman, free man of God. But I said, Freeman, see that little cell, and what they call a blanket is nothing more than it looks like a welcome mat, not so welcome. But I said, can you imagine spending 27 years of your life in jail for a crime you didn't commit? Because this just kept extending. And he said, I don't understand. How can this be possible? And I said, well, you're going to learn some hard lessons. One, that life is not always fair, and that good things don't always happen to good people. But here Mandela came out of that. He wrote this fabulous book I've read twice called Long Walk to Freedom. But he rose above all that. And rather than punishing, he thanked his captors. He thanks his jailer. He went back, he even forgave the government and the judge that had put him in jail. How did he do that? See, he had that enormous crucible, and it transformed him in jail, I think, between being a freedom fighter, now being a uniter of the people. And that's why I admire him so much as a leader, because that's what leaders do. They follow a purpose, a passion, and they unite people around a common cause.
And in those 15 minutes with him, Bill, was that really your big Mandela moment? What did he say to you? What stood out about that meeting?
He certainly was inspiring us to do more and reach out and do things that really mattered. But here is a great spiritual leader, in the same way as Holiness the Dalai Lama that we've been with, is inspiring people. What does a spiritual leader do? He doesn't necessarily bring you to his or her religion. They inspire you to be your best and to make a difference in your short time on earth on behalf of other people. He certainly did that. Look, things are not perfect in South Africa. They certainly aren't perfect in the United States, but he brought people together. And leaders like that only come around once every 50 years. You don't think that the next person comes around. There are not many of these. Ken Frazier of today's era is that kind of leader that inspires people. And there are other leaders coming along that are doing the same thing, younger leaders. And so, but I think that's my hope, is also to inspire many of the emerging leaders to step up and to see their calling, whatever it is, whatever your calling is, and whether it's to deal with inequality, as Mandela did, to deal with poverty, to deal with income inequality, to deal with peace as opposed to war, and to be, whether it's climate change or health for everyone so we can overcome disease. That's what great leaders do. They find a sense of calling, and they become what I call moral leaders. I write about this in my book. They become moral leaders like Mandela because they're following a moral calling. And Mandela went into prison, frankly, as an eye leader, a freedom fighter, going to do it on his own, to realize he had to be a leader of all the South African people, regardless of who they were.
Yeah. In your book as well, Bill, you reference some wonderful emerging leaders. Could you share an example? I think, you had, you've written about a few of them, but could you share one example of an emerging leader? Who inspires you? Why? What is it about the difference they're making that you think, is a great example of what more emerging leaders could be doing today?
One of the people we feature is Abby Fallick. And Abby went to Nicaragua, I think, and when she was in college, and she was way over her head and had a crucible then. But then she formed an organization, Global Citizen Year, and raised a lot of money for students to get prepared to go overseas and spend their, if you will, their a gap year between high school and college to learn about the world and how it works. And I think when you're in a setting different than your own culture, where you don't have all the support structure around you, you'll learn about yourself. And she had to do that as a young woman. So she was providing that to other people. But then COVID comes along and you can't fly people to Kenya or to Colombia or any of these countries where they were sending people. And so she had to recreate this whole experience in a leadership academy. And now they're back to sending people out. But I really admire how she took that challenging time she had now to help other people. And she recently raised $25 million to do that. That may not sound a lot to the billionaires, but it's a lot for those individuals who had that experience. And, she was looking out for younger leaders. So I admire her tremendously. Another one is Rai Barkat, who used to be my running partner. He's a Marine, very dedicated to the Marines, but he came to Harvard Business School and he really felt he was in energy sustainability, solar energy, but he gave up his business, very successful business, by the way. And he formed an organization called With Honor. And what he's trying to do now is bring some civility to our elected representatives by having more military veterans, half Republican, half Democrat. And he asked them to make a pledge that they would work together to try to solve problems across the aisle and not have this split that you often have. And Rai has worked, he's raised a lot of money for that, and he's worked really hard. I think for the last election cycle, he raised $22 million to support candidates who committed to do that and to get more military veterans who had understood they put their life on the line, what it was like to support your country.
Yeah. By contrast, you also write about the dangers of leaders who don't follow, their North Star and use their true north. And I think you make reference to Facebook and also Uber. Can you share with us, what are those dangers? What are those risks? And what do those examples teach us about the risk of not developing these kinds of leaders today?
Well, the risk is we get pulled off course. If we know our true north, we get pulled off course, as I did later in my career. But if you don't know it, you get caught up with external validation. The three great seducers are money, fame, and power. And you get caught up with that. And then you can get caught up in what I call the adulation trap. And you get people admiring you. I think Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook has gotten caught up in this. And all he wants is more and more users. He doesn't care if they're doing evil things. And I won't say he doesn't care, but he doesn't do anything to control it. He doesn't cut back because he's trying to create more shareholder value by having more users. Well, there's no discernment there. There's no selection. And so it's a very, very dangerous thing. I've seen other people, some of our great entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos, who created a great company, and Amazon now has gone off. And he's, he builds he takes the money and builds $500 million yacht. And he builds it in the Netherlands where they're great sea people. But the mast is so tall, it can't get under a bridge. And so instead of adapting his boat, he wants the Dutch to take down their bridge that goes back to the 12th century. What could he do for $500 million to help people, educate more people, to help the poor people, people that are impoverished, to help healthcare, like Bill Gates has done? What could he do for that kind of money? And so I just think that leaders today can lose their way, like a young Elizabeth Holmes did at Theranos, or Travis Kalanick did at Uber. If they don't know their true north, they don't know what's really important. And I think it's all about them, and they get caught up in being admired by millions of people because they're rich or because they have lots of toys. It worries me a lot. And so I'm trying to say to people, don't do that. Think about your time. You have a calling here on earth to make it better for everyone.
Bill, that's such an interesting question. What do you say to people who are caught up in this adulation trap, as you call it? There are a lot of social pressures and influences that reinforce that kind of behavior and those aspirations. What do you say to people caught up in the adulation trap? How do we break that cycle?
Well, that's why I mentioned Ken Fraser's father, who said, you have to do what you know is right. You're not trying to please other people. And I think we need to realize that's the whole process, I think, of understanding your calling on earth, who you are and what your purpose is, and not having a purpose of trying, because that adulation can come and go. I mean, I admire Jack Welch a lot, but, now people are picking on him, and I can tell you, you can lose it very fast if you get caught up in they're trying to be more impressive and everyone admiring you. And it is a real trap. And that's where you get in trouble. And you may or may not get out of that if you go too deep in life. That's why I'm encouraging emerging leaders to go through and look at their role. What are they trying to accomplish early on, and realize their purpose, what we call their North Star, and to follow that deeper purpose. Because I think, and David Brooks wrote about this, are you trying to build a resume, as I got entrapped trying to do in college? Or are you going to talk about what he calls eulogy values? What are people going to say about you at your memorial service? They're going to talk about the kind of person you were, not how much money you're worth, not what your title was, or how much power you had. They're going to talk about your humanity. And that's what I think I look up to. So all the people I feature in my book are people whose humanity, except for this one chapter, people that didn't have it, their humanity and what they have done to help the world. And I think that's what I admire.
I'm curious. I know you've served on multiple boards. You've also sat on the boards of companies like Goldman Sachs, ExxonMobil. Is there an example, Bill? Because I think a lot of corporates also battle with a situation where perhaps they do lose their way, something goes wrong. There's also about protecting reputation and reputational risks. So very often the temptation is to try and cover things up. Do you have an example of a corporate that has lost its way and did the courageous thing? Is there an example? What did they do? How did that turn out for them?
Well, you mentioned Goldman Sachs. Just yesterday, I was talking to Lloyd Blankfein, the former chair, and I worked with him the entire time he was CEO, his 12 and a half years. And we got through that huge financial meltdown, if you will, when all the banks were failing, and Goldman Sachs came through that with shining colors in 2008 and 9. But then in 2010 and 11, we got a lot of criticism for people perceiving that we put the interests of the firm ahead of our clients. And Goldman Sachs' number one mission, written by John Whitehead, one of my role models for leadership, was the client's interests always come first. And I don't think Goldman perceived that they weren't doing that, but a lot of their clients did. So what Lloyd did was he created a business standards committee of 150 partners to take the company apart top to bottom. And he asked me to chair a board committee overseeing this. And we had 16 meetings, and they really made it a better firm. They had to look themselves in the mirror and say, what can we do to do it better? And they had 39 recommendations that transformed the company and their relationship with their clients. They're thriving today under David Solomon's leadership because Lloyd, and to the use of the cliche, never wasted a good crisis. He'd used that to transform the firm. In contrast, Wells Fargo, which had 3.3 million fictitious accounts of consumers, never did that. And so years later, here we are now in 2022, and Wells Fargo is still struggling mightily because they lost sight of their customers, and they've never gotten that back. This goes back, 15 years. So, and so that's why I say I think great leaders really take a hard look and make their companies better. And Lloyd did that to his credit.
Bill, shifting tack a little, just a couple of sort of fun facts. What is one thing people don't really know about you that is something that you're really proud of in your own life?
You're going to think this is, I'm really proud of mentoring some really great leaders that have come on to do great things. And many of the people in my book I've had the privilege of working with, I like to think of them as peer relationships, but I think they would say I help mentor them and do better. And being there for people in really tough times. I had a discussion with Indra Nooyi the other day, the woman, the first non-American to ever head up PepsiCo. And she was very concerned about nutrition and trying to bring that into PepsiCo, and did some amazing things. But then she was challenged by an activist who wanted to break up the company, a man named Nelson Peltz. And I worked to support her. And she was saying how much she appreciated that, because she was able to she had the personal strength to rise above that and see the greater good that PepsiCo was doing and to keep it as one company. And I visited PepsiCo 2 weeks ago and saw how 300,000 employees, jobs all over, challenges in Ukraine and Russia where they have employees. But here's a company that's doing great good around the world. And but I give Indra a lot of credit. Her successor, Ramon Lagarde, has done a fantastic job. But Indra a lot of credit for standing tall when the whole purpose of the company was being challenged, and she stood tall. And so leaders like that, I really admire. And it's been such a privilege to work with people like that when they're facing great challenges. So I can't take any credit for anything, but I do feel like I'm like to think of myself as someone who's there for people when they need help, whether they're just a number of people I've reached out to have lost their jobs, and just helping them. Talked to one mentee the other day who lost his job through what I call a coup, if you will, an internal coup and a board coup. And now he's going to probably get a much bigger job. And that's great. But he had to look himself in the mirror and say, what did I do wrong? And I think all of us do that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to be remembered for really trying to help other people along the way and help them reach their full potential. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. Another fun fact, I've seen what a wonderful connection you and your wonderful wife, Penny, have. What would you say is the secret, part of the secret sauce?
Well, Penny and I think you communicate every day about your relationship. We talk to each other. How are we doing? And it's really important. Marriage, you go through and you can go in different directions. You need to stay together. And she's had a career of her own. I've had mine. We had a tough time when she was battling breast cancer. She's now 25 years out and doing very well. But we built that relationship for 53 years, coming up our 53rd anniversary. But it's important that you work together. We're working together on a family foundation. And I believe you come to this world, I'm an Episcopalian, you come into this world with nothing and you go out of the world with nothing. And in the meantime, what did you do with the gifts you were given? And we've been privileged because of Medtronic stock did well to be very fortunate from that. We've put about 40% of our net work into a foundation that's trying to help other people. Penny's field of transforming healthcare, mine of transforming leadership, trying to build healthy communities. And so those things have been very important to us, but trying to use the resources we've had to help other people.
That's fantastic. And the third and final, fun fact, what is the best part of being a grandfather for you?
It's helping the next generation. And our grandkids are now 15 and 10, two 10-year-olds, a 14 and a 15, trying to help them realize their dreams, not my dreams for them, but their dream. What do they want out of life as they mature? And most important, to have good values. So I think, as grandparents, we don't set rules. We don't tell them what to do, but we can be role models. So we spend a lot of time with our grandchildren trying to, be role models of how you treat other people. So, because I think kids don't learn by what you tell them. They learn by what they see and what they observe. And are you true to what you believe? And so I think that's a very good, opportunity for us. And it's a great joy as well. It's the next generation that's going to make the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And, talking about that, your co-author, Zach, can you just share with us what made you decide to partner with him in this wonderful new book?
One of the great ways to stay young is to work with younger generations. You mentioned my grandchildren, but it's also Zach. I'd known Zach from Harvard Business School. When he graduated in 2009, he agreed to take on my social media. And I didn't know anything about how do you get an active following on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or any of these sites. But also we've written a lot together. So when it came around to write a book for emerging leaders, it made sense that it would be a millennial author and a more senior author. So I asked Zach to partner with B&B, the co-author, with me on this, and he's made tremendous contributions. On the side, he's created a wildly successful online business for home services and products that people need online, and it's flourished during COVID. So his business taken off, but at the same time, he's found time to do this. And so we share a lot. And I think it's what I call reverse mentoring. I think every one of us who is more senior now needs to have mentors who are younger than they are that teach you how do millennials think. So I feel like, having worked with Zach and literally thousands of students from mine at Harvard, I really have a much keener understanding of how millennials and Gen Xers think, these emerging leaders. And so I could write a book that was tailored to them, and not writing from the perspective of a senior leader, but really what are the needs and what are the opportunities, frankly, to make this a clarion call for them to step up and reach their full potential.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful, Bill. And in our kind of final few moments, any final thoughts? What is the first step that you think emerging leaders should take? I mean, people say, where do I begin? What do you think the first step is for them?
First thing, you got to understand who you are and go back and process your story. What were the things that we always ask every class I ever teach? And even in a 1 hour speech, I ask people to go do this. What are the influences of you that you had in the first 18 years of your life? Your parents, your teachers, your coaches, your mentors. Maybe you had negative experiences. What were the difficult times, the crucibles you had? Go back and process and see how did that help you become who you are? And that is the first step towards discovering your true north. And then when you do that, then go back and take that deeper dive into the greatest crucible of your life, when you had to figure out, who am I in this world? And then from that, you gain self-awareness, and then you can move to get feedback from other people. I think we all need truth tellers to give us honest feedback. And I think everyone needs a process of introspection. Today is a go-go world 24/7. Everyone has a task list. I say, set the electronics aside, set the task list aside, and just take 20 minutes once a day to really reflect on, how did I show up today? Was I doing things that I wanted to do? Was I a good leader for the people I work with? Was I a good human being? Just take 20 minutes a day. Maybe I meditate to do it. Some people do mindfulness. Others take a jog or a walk, but they do those things. And so that's the way I would get started. And then, but don't forget the feedback, to ask other people to give you honest feedback.
Yes. And, Mandela, I mean, he was voted the leader of leaders of the 20th century by the BBC. Do you think his leadership is still relevant today? And if so, why?
Oh, Mandela for sure is. I said Jack Welch was a man of his time. No, because Mandela is a spiritual leader. He was placed here on earth to bring people together in South Africa, but really to bring people together around the world. That's why he's such a great leader, because his spirit still inspiring to me, even though he's deceased. And I was glad he lived such a long life. And I remember seeing the movie Invictus, and that inspiring time with the rugby team, which with the exception of one player was all white. And yet he was there and he wore the Afrikaner jersey, I believe in green. And it was a way of saying to people, see, that's what leaders do. They have their moment to bring people together around what really matters in the world. And he did that, and it's very inspiring. I wish we had a Nelson Mandela here in the United States to bring us together, because we're so separated. And people are now looking to business leaders to be the ones to bring us together. And I actually think they are. I think the business leaders now, today's new tribe, if you will, are not just trying to feather their own nest. There are exceptions, but I think the great ones that I feature in my book are ones that are really like Paul Pullman, a great business leader from Unilever, who's still working nationally every day on the whole question of climate change and sustainability.
Yeah. So any final closing thoughts, any final kind of words of wisdom, your call for action?
You only get one shot at life on this earth. Use that time to help other people and make a difference in the world. Figure out what your calling is. My last chapter in my book is called The Moral Leader. And moral leaders are people, this is not a religious concept. Moral leaders are people that know their calling, and then they carry it out. And they speak out on behalf of people that don't have those opportunities. I know Chip Berg at Unilever, at Levi's, talks about a lot of his customers are young women who are scared in school. And so he's talking about gun safety. And he's speaking out on behalf of the rights of women. He says 60% of our employees are women, have to speak out on women's rights. And people do that. Mark Benioff, the head of Salesforce, has been so successful, is talking about the community. He's trying to rally people in San Francisco to help the homeless. Even wants a tax on his company and other companies, other tech companies, to raise money to help the homeless. So these are people that are moving with a calling, to their credit. And I really admire people that do so. So I think everyone on this call, be that moral leader that Nelson Mandela was in your own way, and decide what you can do to make a difference in around the people that you help. And at the end of the day, you'll be able to look back and say, look, it wasn't perfect. We did the best we could, but I think we helped a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, Bill, I have to tell you, I am truly inspired. Congratulations to you and Zach. I so look forward to doing more with you and working with you. And thank you for your incredible commitment to developing this next generation of leaders.
And thank you for the work you're doing to bring this inspiration of Nelson Mandela to people and turn it into a book, a course, things that continue to inspire people. And I hope we can find a way to work together and inspire some more, maybe back at Harvard or anywhere else you want to go.
Yeah, I look forward to that, Bill. Thank you so much. We all know that bold leadership is about making thoughtful, clear choices, and leading boldly is about taking bold action, just one small step at a time. One small step for you, but together, one giant step for the rest of humanity. Until next time, take care and take bold action.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leading Boldly into the Future. Please find links and connections mentioned in this show in our blog, and never miss an episode by subscribing at anne-pratt.com. That's ANNE-PRATT.com. May these insights from inspiring industry leaders, remarkable disruptors, and courageous champions of change bring forth a brand new you, emboldened, empowered, and ready to inspire hope. Come back soon, share with your friends, sign up on anne-pratt.com and join our movement for change. Why? Because the world needs you to lead boldly too.